Hi everyone. In the previous video, we looked at kind of how to make a table, insert values into them, and alter our tables too. Now, when we were doing relational algebra, a lot of the stuff we were doing was operating between two different tables. So in this video, we're going to take a look at how to make another table and also how to make those tables connect to each other using ideas of primary and foreign keys here. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is just create another table called student. It's going to be pretty similar to our other table up above. So it's going to have a name of variable character of 20. I'm going to give it an email for each student. I'm going to give them a major, maybe instead of a department name, just so that we could say which major they're in. And then I'm going to go ahead and try to figure out a way to reference this table here, our student table, up to this table of instructor. So two things really need to happen. Not necessarily you always need a primary key, but it's helpful for one table to have a primary key so that you can figure out a way for the other table to get that reference too, okay? So one way that we can create a primary key, I'm gonna make it the first one that we have up here, is go ahead and make the variable name, attribute name, sorry, it's gonna be ID. I'm going to make this an integer just because it's going to go from 0 to 1. And then the way to make a primary key is by typing out primary, KEY, for key as well. Okay. Now, one thing is that I have to drop this table because I'm not altering or adding this in. I'm just going to keep creating it here. So let me go ahead and try to run these two codes. Oops, let me just run this one. Cool. And now if I take a look at my instructor, we can see I have an ID and it says PK integer, which means that my ID is my primary key and it's of type integer. Okay. So now what do we do to be able to say, okay, if I have like 10 students and one instructor, how do I get the students that belong to that instructor? What we could say here now is essentially, let's go ahead and put a new ID down here. We can make a new attribute. I'm going to call this one instructor ID. And what this is going to be is the reference to instructor here. Right now, let's try to do a little operation. I'm going to make this a variable character of 20, and we'll look at why this might not work later on. And essentially, after you create a new attribute that holds your relation, essentially your arrow pointing from student up to instructor, you're going to tell your code or your table, hey, I want to create a foreign key using whatever I created here, whatever attribute I want. Okay. So I can call this instructor ID or underscore ID. I could call it I dash ID. What I'm trying to get at here is whatever this is called, you're going to want to put it inside of your foreign key. So that tells your SQL code that this variable is a foreign key. We're going to use the keyword references. So essentially this foreign key references. And what do we want to reference? We want it to reference the instructor table. And we saw earlier that we used the .id from here. Now, let's just try running this to create our table and let's see what happens here. So we get this error that pops up when you use a .id that the schema instructor does not exist. When we're using PostgreSQL and you do instructor dot something, it's going to be looking at your full schema. So essentially you would think that this public is named instructor. We don't want to do that. We just want to look at the tables that we have down here, our instructor and student table. And I'm going to go ahead and essentially say, go ahead and get the instructor table here and give me the attribute that's over here. Okay. Do you see how these two are related? So my ID down here is this ID over here. Now let's try to run this one more time. We'll see here that we get this bigger error. Key columns I underscore ID and ID are of incompatible types. Character varying and integer.foreign key constraint cannot be implemented. So one thing you need to know about your constraints and these references is that whatever ID is whatever you're using as your foreign key has to match whatever data type we have up here, okay? So actually, let's try to do something here. Let me try to make this one int. Let's see if this works. Cool. This one worked too. So it doesn't need to be the exact same capital way too, but it needs to be the same data type of it, okay? Awesome. And now what we could do here is I could say something like select star from instructor and then select star from student. And I have a few things created for us here. I'm going to go ahead and use, let me delete these to insert into values. Excuse me. So I have for my table of student, I have name, email, major, and I_ID. And I'm going to go ahead and grab my instructor inserts. Let me put this one down here for us too. Cool. And let me go ahead, run this one as well. Whoops. Oh, because I created a new variable here, ID, I'm going to need to put in our IDs that we have for each of these. So this one will be John Lynch. This is John Doe. And I'm going to go ahead and run these two. Cool. And this works here. Okay. And now let's see if this guy works for us as well. We have relation student does not exist. Column ID. Oh, let me get rid of the IDs down here. Sorry about that. So now we could say here, insert into student for the columns name, email, major, and instructor ID, these values here. One more thing is that I didn't call them instructor ID anymore. I called it I_ID. So I'm going to do it this way here for us. So one thing you'll also notice is that my insert into doesn't have the specific column names. But if you wanted to only insert into, for instance, name, major, and ID, we can remove the email category here too. And I'll show you really quick one way to do that. Which one is too long? Oh, see, now we have a variable character. Let me just get rid of these names here. This area might not see too much, but it's essentially saying that my string is over 20 long. Here we go. So now this one worked too. So let's try to select from instructor. Okay, so our instructor is built up okay. Let's try instruct from student. And we have a few more students here. So I wanted to show you one more thing here is that we can also change how we do the insertion into it as well. Let me try to run this for us. So essentially, when you say insert into table name student, you can give it the specific attributes that you want it to be inserted into. So I'm saying insert into student for their email, name, instructor ID, and major, these values here. You could do it basically up here as well. It's a different way of doing it. Or you could do it as I did it up here with not specifying any attribute names, but SQL assumes that it's going to be placed into those attributes. So it's essentially, if you don't tell it which attributes to do, it's going to use the default attributes, okay? So if I go ahead and try to select from student now, cool. We'll see I have another biology. And let me just get one more mock student here into our more tests. Let me do Luke, something like this, let's do math, or I'll do CS, okay? All right, so we're kind of getting somewhere with these information, and now we're going to look at in our next video how to do some queries between these two tables to get some interesting information there, okay?